Have you ever noticed how much of your inner peace disappears the moment you decide that someone should not be the way they are? Perhaps it happens in a conversation with someone you love. They say something you wish they had not said. They make a choice you cannot understand. They disappoint you, ignore you, misunderstand you, or simply live in a way that conflicts with what you believe is right. And almost without noticing it, something inside you begins to tighten. Your mind starts explaining what is wrong with them, what they should have done differently, and why you have every reason to feel the way you do. Sometimes this happens with strangers, sometimes with family, sometimes with people from your past, and perhaps more often than you realize, it happens with the person you see in the mirror. You judge yourself for not being further along. You judge yourself for trusting the wrong person, staying too long, leaving too soon, wasting time, making mistakes, growing older, feeling afraid, or still carrying something you thought you should have healed years ago. The voice of judgment can become so familiar that you stop recognizing it as a voice at all. It simply begins to sound like reality. But what if judgment is not reality? What if it is simply one of the ways the ego interprets reality? And what if beneath all those opinions, labels, comparisons, and conclusions, there is another way of seeing? You may have spent years believing that peace will come when the people around you finally understand you, when someone apologizes, when your family changes, when the person who hurt you realizes what they did, when people become kinder, more thoughtful, more responsible, more aware. It can seem perfectly reasonable to believe that when the outside world behaves differently, the disturbance inside you will finally disappear. Yet, life has a quiet way of showing us something else. There will always be someone who sees the world differently from you. There will always be behavior you do not understand. There will always be people who make choices you would never make. And if your peace requires everyone around you to become what you believe they should be, then your peace is always waiting for permission from the world. Perhaps there is another possibility. Perhaps peace begins when you stop asking the world to earn it for you. Giving up the need to judge does not mean becoming passive. It does not mean pretending that every action is wise or every relationship is healthy. It does not mean remaining close to people who repeatedly harm you. There may be moments when love asks you to say no. There may be relationships you need to leave. There may be boundaries that protect something sacred within you. But there is a profound difference between seeing clearly and condemning. You can recognize that someone's behavior is unhealthy without turning that person into your enemy. You can walk away without carrying hatred with you. You can disagree without allowing disagreement to become resentment. You can protect your peace without needing to punish another person inside your mind. This is where something begins to change. Imagine holding a stone in your hand all day because someone gave it to you years ago. Your fingers ache, your arm becomes tired. Eventually you become so accustomed to carrying it that you forget your hand was ever empty. Then one day you realize that nobody is forcing you to hold it. Judgment can be like that stone. We often believe we are holding judgment because another person deserves it. Yet while we are holding it, we are the ones carrying the weight. The person you resent may be sleeping peacefully while you replay the conversation. The person you condemn may have moved on while you continue having arguments with them in your imagination. The past may be finished, yet your mind keeps inviting it into the present. And so the question slowly changes. Instead of asking, do they deserve my forgiveness? You begin asking, do I deserve my peace? Instead of asking, were they wrong? You begin asking, what am I still carrying because I need them to be wrong? These questions are not meant to erase what happened. They are invitations to discover where your freedom actually lives. There is a spacious part of you beneath all judgment, a quiet awareness that does not need to compare itself with anyone. It does not need to prove that it is right. It does not need another person to become smaller so that it can feel larger. This deeper presence simply witnesses. It understands that every human being is moving through life with a history you cannot completely see, fears you may never know, wounds they may not know how to name, and lessons that belong to their own journey. And when you begin seeing from that deeper place, compassion becomes possible. Not because everyone suddenly deserves your approval, but because you no longer need condemnation in order to understand what you are seeing. Think of a tree in autumn. It does not condemn another tree because its leaves fall sooner. The river does not criticize the stone because the stone cannot flow. The sky does not reject the storm. It allows the storm to pass through its vastness without becoming the storm itself. Perhaps your awareness is more like that sky than you have remembered. Thoughts come, opinions come, anger comes. Disappointment comes. But you do not have to become every thought that appears within you. You can notice judgment without allowing judgment to become your identity. This is awareness. And awareness is where freedom quietly begins. The next time you notice yourself judging someone, you do not have to judge yourself for judging them. That would simply create another layer of the same suffering. Instead, you might become curious. You might quietly ask, what is happening within me right now? What am I protecting? What expectation is being threatened? What fear is asking to be seen? Sometimes you may discover that what irritates you in another person touches something unresolved within yourself. Perhaps you judge someone for needing attention because a part of you was taught never to ask for attention. Perhaps someone's confidence bothers you because you learned to make yourself small. Perhaps you become angry when people disappoint you because somewhere inside you still believe that being loved means never being disappointed. The person in front of you may not be the entire source of your reaction. They may simply be touching a place within you that was already tender. And this realization can become one of life's quiet gifts. Suddenly, judgment becomes a doorway into self-awareness. Instead of spending all your energy analyzing another person, you begin listening to yourself. Instead of asking how you can change them, you begin wondering what this moment is trying to reveal within you. This is not weakness. It is not self-blame. It is simply the willingness to bring consciousness to a place where the ego once reacted automatically. And perhaps this is why giving up judgment can feel frightening at first. The ego believes that judgment protects you. It tells you that if you stop condemning what happened, you are saying it was acceptable. If you forgive, you will become vulnerable again. If you release resentment, the other person somehow wins. But peace is not a victory someone wins over someone else. Peace is what remains when you no longer need the battle. You may begin to see that forgiveness is not about returning to the same relationship. Understanding does not require agreement. Compassion does not require access. You can bless someone from a distance. You can release someone and still remember what the experience taught you. You can close a door without closing your heart. And perhaps the deepest judgment you are being invited to release is the judgment you carry toward yourself. The younger version of you who did not know what you know now. The frightened version of you who made choices from fear. The lonely version who accepted less than you deserved. The confused version who stayed in places that no longer felt right. You may have spent years looking backward and asking, how could I have done that? But perhaps a gentler question is waiting. What was I trying to survive, understand, or learn at that time? You cannot heal the person you once were by standing over them with condemnation. You heal by meeting that version of yourself with the awareness you have today. You begin to recognize that you were always becoming more conscious, even through your mistakes. You were learning, you were falling and rising, you were forgetting and remembering. Like a seed beneath the soil, much of your growth was happening long before you could see it. And something beautiful begins when you stop requiring your past to be different. Energy that was trapped in regret becomes available for presence. Energy trapped in resentment becomes available for love. Energy trapped in judgment becomes available for peace. You begin to understand that giving up judgment is not primarily about becoming a nicer person. It is about becoming free enough to see life without constantly filtering it through the ego's need to condemn, compare, and control. You begin remembering that your true self was never strengthened by making someone else wrong. Your true self does not need superiority. It does not need revenge. It does not need the past rewritten before it can rest. It needs only your willingness to return. Return to awareness. Return to compassion. Return to the quiet presence beneath the noise. And as you make that return, another question begins to emerge, perhaps the question that can take us deeper than judgment itself. If judgment is not truly protecting your peace, then what is the ego trying so desperately to protect? The answer may reveal why we judge in the first place and why becoming aware of that hidden pattern can open the door to a freedom you may have been searching for all along. Perhaps the ego is not trying to protect your peace at all. Perhaps it is trying to protect an image of who you believe you must be, the one who is right, the one who understands, the one who behaves properly, the one who would never make that mistake. And when someone behaves in a way that threatens this image, judgment appears almost automatically. It says, I would never do that. It says they should know better. It says, if they were more conscious, more loving, more thoughtful, they would behave differently. For a moment, this can make you feel secure. Judgment gives the ego a position from which to stand. If someone else is wrong, then perhaps you can feel right. If someone else is weak, perhaps you can feel strong. If someone else is lost, perhaps you can reassure yourself that you know the way. But anything that needs another person to be less in order for you to feel more cannot bring lasting peace. The ego lives through comparison. It looks sideways at life. It asks who is ahead, who is behind, who has more, who has less, who is respected, who is ignored, who has succeeded, who has failed. Even on a spiritual path, the ego can quietly learn the language of spirituality and begin comparing again. It may whisper that you are more awakened than someone else, more forgiving, more peaceful, more aware. And the moment spirituality becomes another reason to feel superior, the ego has simply changed its clothing. Awareness invites something very different. Awareness does not ask you to destroy the ego or fight against it. Fighting the ego can become another expression of ego. Instead, awareness allows you to observe what is happening without immediately becoming it. You may notice a judgment arise and simply say inwardly, there is judgment. Not, I am a terrible person for thinking this. Not, I must get rid of this thought. Just, there is judgment. That small space between you and the thought can change everything. Imagine sitting beside a river watching leaves move across the surface. You do not jump into the water to chase every leaf. You allow each one to appear and disappear. Your thoughts can be seen in much the same way. Some are compassionate, some are fearful, some are generous, some are judgmental. They move through awareness, but awareness itself remains. The deeper you become aware of this, the more you begin to understand that you are not required to believe everything your mind tells you. Your mind may say, that person does not respect me. Awareness might quietly ask, do I know that completely? Your mind may say, they always do this. Awareness may notice how quickly one painful moment has become the word always. Your mind may say, I cannot be peaceful until they apologize. Awareness might ask, am I willing to give another person that much authority over my inner state? These are not questions designed to invalidate your feelings. Your feelings matter. Pain deserves to be acknowledged. Anger may contain important information. Disappointment may show you where a boundary has been crossed. But there is a difference between honoring a feeling and building a home inside it. You can listen to anger without becoming anger. You can feel disappointment without turning disappointment into a permanent story about another person. You can recognize betrayal without allowing betrayal to become the lens through which you see every future relationship. The ego wants certainty. It wants to put people into categories because categories feel safe. Good person, bad person, trustworthy person, selfish person, successful person, failure, friend, enemy. But human beings are rarely that simple. A person can be generous in one moment and frightened in another. Someone can love you and still lack the awareness to love you in the way you need. A person can make a harmful choice without that choice containing the totality of who they are. And you are no different. You have probably had moments you are proud of and moments you would never want to repeat. You have spoken from love, and perhaps you have also spoken from fear. You have understood others, and there have been times when you misunderstood them completely. If you would not want the worst moment of your life to become the definition of your entire being, perhaps you can begin offering others the same spaciousness. This does not erase responsibility. You can hold someone accountable without reducing them to their behavior. You can say, what happened was not acceptable without adding, therefore, you are beyond love. This distinction can become deeply freeing because judgment often hides behind the belief that condemnation is necessary for discernment. But discernment is quiet. Judgment is emotionally charged. Discernment says this relationship is not healthy for me. Judgment says this person is terrible. Discernment says, I do not want to participate in this behavior. Judgment says, anyone who behaves this way is beneath me. Discernment helps you choose. Judgment keeps you emotionally attached to what you are trying to leave. You may physically walk away from a relationship and still carry the person everywhere in your mind. You may stop speaking to them, yet continue speaking to them internally every night. You may create distance while remaining bound through resentment. Then the body has left, but consciousness has not. This is why letting go is such a profound spiritual movement. It is not merely removing someone from your life. It is releasing your demand that the past should have been different. There may be someone in your life right now whose behavior you wish you could change. Perhaps it is a partner who does not communicate the way you wish they would. A parent who never gave you the understanding you needed. An adult child whose choices worry you. A friend who disappointed you. A colleague whose personality seems to disturb you every time you meet. Notice how much energy can be spent rehearsing what these people should do differently. He should be more considerate. She should understand me by now. They should appreciate everything I have done. They should know better. The word should often reveals an argument with reality. Reality says, this is who this person is choosing to be right now. The ego replies, but they should be different. And suffering grows in the distance between those two statements. Acceptance begins when you stop confusing what you prefer with what reality is obligated to provide. You can prefer kindness while acknowledging that someone is not being kind. You can prefer honesty while recognizing that someone has chosen dishonesty. You can wish for closeness while accepting that another person may not be capable of meeting you there. Acceptance does not say, I like this. It says, I am willing to see what is here. And only when you see clearly can you respond consciously. Consider someone who has spent years trying to please everyone. Perhaps this feels familiar. You learned early that harmony meant keeping people happy. You became skilled at reading faces, adjusting your words, avoiding conflict, and saying yes when something inside you wanted to say no. Then one day you encounter someone who does not seem concerned with pleasing anyone. They speak freely. They disappoint people without appearing consumed by guilt. They choose themselves in ways you were never taught to do. You may judge them as selfish, and perhaps sometimes they are behaving selfishly. But if the judgment carries unusual emotional intensity, there may be something more to explore. Maybe their freedom is touching the part of you that has never given itself permission to be free. This does not mean every judgment is secretly envy. It simply means that your reactions can become teachers when you approach them with curiosity rather than certainty. The people who disturb you may sometimes reveal the boundaries you need to create. At other times, they may reveal wounds you need to heal. And sometimes they simply reveal how deeply you have been trained to believe that everyone should experience life as you do. This becomes especially visible when fear enters. Fear and judgment are often close companions. You may judge what you do not understand because understanding would require you to step beyond the familiar. You may judge another person's path because their choices make you question your own. You may judge someone who changes because their change reminds you that nothing remains exactly as it was. Life, however, is movement. A river does not ask permission before turning. Seasons do not apologize for changing the landscape. A tree does not remain small because the trees around it are uncomfortable with its growth. And human beings are also moving through seasons of consciousness. Someone you once understood may change. Someone who once understood you may no longer recognize the direction your life is taking. Relationships may shift. Beliefs may soften. Priorities may change. What felt meaningful at 30 may feel empty at 50. What you were certain about 10 years ago may now appear incomplete. If you judge every version of yourself that you outgrow, transformation becomes painful. Imagine looking at an old photograph of yourself. Perhaps you see a younger face filled with hopes you no longer carry. You remember choices that now seem naive. Maybe you remember a relationship you believed would last forever. Maybe you remember how desperately you wanted approval from people whose opinions no longer matter to you. It is easy to look backward with the knowledge you have today and ask why you did not know better. But the person in that photograph had not lived the years you have lived since. They did not have your present awareness. They could only choose from the consciousness available to them at that moment. Perhaps this is one of the gentlest forms of forgiveness. Refusing to demand yesterday's version of yourself possessed today's wisdom. You did not know what you had not yet learned. And this understanding can soften the way you see others as well. Perhaps the person who hurt you was acting from a level of fear you could not see. Perhaps they were repeating patterns they had never examined. Perhaps they were giving you the only version of love they had learned. Understanding this does not make harmful behavior acceptable. It simply prevents you from needing hatred in order to recognize that harm occurred. You can understand the origin of a wound without volunteering to be wounded again. This is where boundaries and compassion can exist together. There is a common fear that if you stop judging people, you will become vulnerable to them. But non-judgment is not blindness. In fact, when emotional condemnation becomes quiet, you may see more clearly. Anger sometimes tells you, punish them. Fear says, never trust anyone again. Judgment says they are terrible. Awareness may simply say, this is not where I belong. There is enormous strength in that simplicity. You do not need to turn someone into a villain before giving yourself permission to leave. You do not need a courtroom inside your mind before choosing peace. You can simply recognize that your paths are moving in different directions. And then you can release. But perhaps the most exhausting judgment is not directed toward other people. It is the quiet comparison you make between your life and the lives you imagine everyone else is living. You see someone who seems happier, healthier, more loved, more certain of their purpose. You compare their visible moment with your private struggle. You wonder why life appears easier for them. The ego turns life into a race that no one actually agreed to enter. It tells you there is an appropriate age to have figured everything out, an appropriate timeline for healing, a correct way to build a family, a correct way to grieve, a correct amount of time to recover from loss. Then life refuses to follow the schedule. A relationship ends when you thought it would deepen. A dream changes. Your body ages. Someone you love leaves this world. A path that once seemed certain disappears. And judgment turns inward. I should be stronger. I should be over this. I should know what I am doing by now. But what if life is not asking you to judge the season you are in? What if it is asking you to inhabit it? Winter does not apologize for having no flowers. The earth does not panic when a field appears empty. Beneath the surface, life is still moving. There may be seasons when your growth is invisible even to you. Times when all you can see is uncertainty. You may feel stuck when something within you is actually rearranging itself. Judgment says, nothing is happening. Awareness says, I cannot yet see what is happening. There is humility in that difference. And humility creates space for trust. You begin to loosen your grip on the need to know exactly what everything means. You stop assigning immediate labels to every experience. Good, bad, success, failure, blessing, disaster. You begin allowing life to remain mysterious for a little longer. Perhaps you can remember something that once seemed like a terrible disappointment, but eventually redirected you towards something important. A door closed, and years later you realize you would never have found another path if it had remained open. This does not mean every painful experience must be romanticized. Pain is pain, loss is loss. There are events we may never completely understand, but you can allow yourself to say, I do not yet know the whole story. Those words can be surprisingly peaceful. The ego wants a verdict. Awareness can live with mystery. And the source, however you understand that word, may be found more easily in this openness than in certainty. When you sit quietly enough, you may begin sensing that beneath your opinions about life, there is life itself. Beneath your judgments about people, there is presence. Beneath your fear about the future, there is this breath, this moment, this awareness that is already here. You do not have to create that awareness. You simply notice it. You may sit in silence for a few moments and listen to the sounds around you, a distant voice, the movement of air, the hum of the room, your own breathing. For those few moments, nothing needs a label. You do not have to decide whether the sound is good or bad. You simply hear, and perhaps this simple act contains a spiritual lesson. Can you learn to meet parts of life with the same openness? Can you see someone without immediately deciding what they should become? Can you feel an emotion without calling yourself weak for feeling it? Can you experience uncertainty without deciding that something has gone wrong? Can you look at your own life without comparing it to an imagined timeline? This is not something you accomplish once. It is a practice of returning. You will judge again. The ego will compare again. Old reactions will return. Someone will say exactly the thing that activates an old wound, and for a moment you may forget everything you have remembered here. That moment does not mean you have failed. It simply becomes another invitation. You notice, you breathe, you become aware, and instead of feeding the judgment, you become curious about it. What am I afraid of here? What am I trying to control? What expectation am I holding? What would happen if I released the need to be right in this moment? Sometimes you may discover that being right has cost you peace. There are arguments that continue long after anyone remembers what started them. Relationships become cold because neither person wants to take the first step. Families carry conflicts across decades because everyone is waiting for someone else to admit fault. The ego says, if I soften first, I lose. Love asks, what exactly are you trying to win? Imagine standing at the edge of the ocean holding a handful of sand. The tighter you squeeze, the more slips through your fingers. Control often works this way. We believe tightening our grip will create security, but sometimes the grip itself becomes the source of tension. You cannot control what another person thinks of you. You cannot control whether everyone understands your intentions. You cannot control the choices your grown children make. You cannot control how quickly someone forgives you. You cannot control every turn life will take. But you can become conscious of what you bring to this moment. You can choose whether fear or love receives your attention. You can choose whether resentment is rehearsed or released. You can choose whether you carry another person's behavior into tomorrow. And perhaps this is where true inner power has always been waiting. Not in controlling the world, but in remembering that the world does not have to control the quality of your consciousness. As judgment begins to loosen, something unexpected happens. You may start seeing people differently, but more importantly, you begin experiencing yourself differently. There is less to defend, less to prove, less to compare. You begin sensing a quiet spaciousness where the constant commentary used to be. And in that space, you may hear something much gentler than the ego's voice. You may hear the invitation to forgive. Not because the past was acceptable, not because you have forgotten, not because you want to return to what hurt you, but because some part of you is finally ready to stop carrying what happened. And when that readiness appears, you begin approaching the deeper territory of the heart, where forgiveness is no longer something you force yourself to do, but something that becomes possible when you remember who you are beneath the wound. That is where the journey begins to turn, from understanding the ego toward returning to your true self. And perhaps returning to your true self begins with understanding that forgiveness is not something you owe to the person who hurt you. It is something you may choose when you are ready to stop allowing the wound to occupy so much space within you. For a long time, you may have believed that holding resentment keeps you safe. You may have thought that if you remain angry enough, alert enough, guarded enough, you will never be hurt in the same way again. Yet resentment has a way of becoming a relationship of its own. The person may be gone, but the conversation continues inside you. The event may have ended years ago, but your body still tightens when you remember it. Forgiveness does not ask you to deny this pain. It invites you to stop making pain your permanent home. There may be someone you have carried inside your mind for a very long time. Perhaps they betrayed your trust. Perhaps they abandoned you when you needed them. Perhaps they never became the parent, partner, friend, or family member you hoped they would be. You may have waited for an apology that never arrived. And somewhere inside you, there may still be a quiet belief that your healing cannot be complete until that person finally understands what they did. But what happens if they never understand? What happens if the apology never comes? What happens if they continue telling themselves a completely different version of the story? Does your peace have to wait? This may be one of the most liberating questions you can ask yourself. You cannot force another person into awareness. You cannot make someone see what they are not ready to see. You cannot demand that another consciousness awaken according to your timetable. But you can decide whether their lack of awareness will continue living inside you. Imagine standing beside a river carrying a heavy bag filled with stones. Each stone has a name: betrayal, rejection, humiliation, regret, anger. Perhaps some stones have been carried for decades. You may have become so accustomed to their weight that carrying them feels normal. Then one day, you sit beside the river and realize that you have a choice. You do not have to throw all the stones away at once. Perhaps you are not ready. Perhaps forgiveness happens slowly. You may begin with one stone, one memory, one person, one moment. You hold it. You acknowledge what it cost you. You allow yourself to feel what you never allowed yourself to feel. And then, when you are ready, you place it down. That is forgiveness. Not pretending the stone was never heavy. Simply deciding that you no longer need to carry it everywhere you go. There is a great tenderness required here, because sometimes the person you most need to forgive is yourself. You may be carrying old decisions as evidence against yourself. You remember the opportunity you missed, the relationship you damaged, the years you believe you wasted. Perhaps you remember something you said in anger and wish you could take back. Perhaps you stayed somewhere long after your heart knew it was time to leave. Perhaps you left and then wondered whether you should have stayed. The mind can create an endless courtroom in which you are both the accused and the judge. But healing rarely happens in a courtroom. Healing happens when you become willing to understand. You might look at the person you were then and ask, what did I know at that time? What was I afraid of? What was I searching for? What was I trying to protect? Perhaps you made that choice because you desperately wanted to be loved. Perhaps you stayed because you were afraid of being alone. Perhaps you spoke harshly because you had never learned how to express your pain. Perhaps you chased approval because you had forgotten how to give approval to yourself. Understanding does not erase responsibility. It simply brings compassion into the place where condemnation once lived. You can acknowledge, I wish I had chosen differently, without deciding, therefore, I am unworthy. You can repair what can be repaired. You can apologize when an apology is needed. You can learn. And then you can release yourself from the belief that punishment is the same thing as transformation. You do not become more loving by hating the person you used to be. You become more loving by bringing awareness to what was once unconscious. This is the quiet miracle of awareness. The moment you can truly see a pattern, you are no longer completely trapped inside it. You begin recognizing that the self you have judged so harshly was never the deepest truth of who you are. Beneath the mistakes, beneath the fear, beneath all the identities you have collected, there is something quieter. You might call it your true self. You might call it spirit. You might call it awareness. You might call it the presence of the source within you. The name matters less than the experience. It is the part of you that becomes visible in moments of deep stillness. The part that does not need to prove anything. The part that can look at another human being and recognize a shared vulnerability. The part that knows somehow that love is closer to your nature than fear. You do not have to manufacture this part of yourself. You are remembering it. Think of the sky on a day filled with clouds. If you look upward, you may see only gray, yet the blue sky has not disappeared. It is simply hidden from view. Your judgments are sometimes like those clouds. Fear can become a cloud. Resentment can become a cloud. Shame can become a cloud. But the awareness beneath them has not been destroyed. The work is not to create a new sky. It is to remember what has always been there. This is why stillness can become such an important part of releasing judgment. When the mind is constantly occupied, judgment moves quickly. Someone says something, and before you know it, the mind has built an entire story. But in stillness, there is a pause. And within that pause, choice returns. Perhaps someone criticizes you. Your first reaction may be defensive. You feel the familiar heat in your body. The mind prepares its response. It gathers evidence. It wants to prove that the other person is wrong. But imagine allowing one breath before you answer. Just one. In that breath, you may ask, do I need to defend myself right now? Sometimes the answer will be yes. There are moments when clarity requires speaking. But sometimes you may realize that nothing needs to be defended. Another person's opinion is simply passing through their consciousness. It does not have the power to define you unless you give it that power. This is particularly important if you have spent much of your life pleasing others. People-pleasing and judgment may appear opposite, but they often grow from the same fear. The belief that your peace depends upon other people's approval. When you need everyone to approve of you, you become highly sensitive to how they see you. And when they fail to give you the approval you want, resentment can quietly appear. You may think, after everything I've done for them, how can they treat me this way? Underneath the resentment may be an unspoken agreement that the other person never knew they had made. I will sacrifice myself for you, and in return, you will make me feel worthy. But no human being can permanently fulfill that agreement. Eventually, returning to yourself means releasing people from the responsibility of giving you your worth. You begin giving from love rather than from the need to be needed. You begin saying yes when yes feels aligned and no when no is honest. You become less interested in managing everyone's perception of you. And strangely, as you stop needing so much approval, you may also become less judgmental of those who do not provide it. Freedom moves in both directions. You release others from your expectations, and you release yourself from theirs. This does not mean becoming indifferent. Love is not indifference. Love cares deeply, but love does not need to possess. Love does not say, become what I need you to become so that I can be peaceful. Love says, I honor your journey, and I honor mine. Sometimes those journeys remain together. Sometimes they separate. Both can be held with dignity. You may have experienced a relationship that reached its natural ending. Perhaps neither person was entirely wrong. You simply changed. The things that once connected you no longer did. And because endings can feel frightening, the mind searched for someone to blame. It is often easier to leave when you have made the other person into a villain. But not every ending requires a villain. Sometimes two paths simply diverge. A river does not accuse the land when it changes direction. It follows the opening that appears. Perhaps there are moments in your own life when you can do the same. You can say, thank you for what this relationship taught me. I release what no longer belongs to me. I allow both of us to continue. There is grace in an ending that does not require hatred. And this grace becomes possible when you begin trusting life more deeply. Judgment often grows from the belief that you know exactly how life should unfold. This person should have stayed. That opportunity should have worked. My children should have chosen differently. My body should not be aging. I should not be starting over at this stage of my life. But life rarely asks permission before changing. Seasons turn. People leave. Bodies change. Plans dissolve. New doors appear where you were not looking. The ego experiences uncertainty as a threat because it wants control. The deeper self can begin experiencing uncertainty as space. You do not know what comes next, and perhaps you do not have to. There is something peaceful about admitting that. You can have an intention without demanding a particular outcome. You can move toward love without insisting that love arrive in a specific form. You can seek healing without deciding exactly how healing must look. You can trust without possessing a map. Imagine a seed beneath the earth. It cannot see the sunlight it is moving toward. It does not know the exact shape it will take when it breaks through the soil. Yet something within it knows how to move. Perhaps intention works in a similar way. There is an intelligence within life that may become easier to sense when the mind stops insisting on controlling every detail. You can choose the quality of consciousness you bring to the journey. You can intend to live from kindness. You can intend to forgive. You can intend to be present. You can intend to respond rather than react. You can intend to remember love when fear appears. Then you allow life to meet you. This is very different from trying to control life. Control says, this must happen. Intention says, this is how I choose to meet whatever happens. And when intention replaces control, judgment begins losing some of its power. You stop evaluating every event according to whether it fulfilled your plan. You become more curious. What is this moment asking me to see? What might life be showing me here? What can I release? Where can I bring love? These questions turn ordinary experiences into spiritual practice. Even aging can become such a practice. There comes a time when the mirror changes. The body moves differently. Certain dreams may no longer carry the same urgency. You may look at younger people and remember who you once were. The ego can judge this process. It may say that youth was better, that something valuable is being lost. But perhaps aging also offers something. It can strip away the illusion that you have unlimited time to remain at war with yourself. At some point, you begin asking whether you really want to carry old resentment into another year. Do you really want to spend another season trying to convince someone to understand you? Do you want to use the precious attention you have left judging the shape of your body, the mistakes of your past, or the path another person has chosen? Perhaps aging can become an invitation to simplify, to forgive more quickly, to say what matters, to sit quietly, to notice the morning light, to become grateful for ordinary things that once seemed too small to notice. Gratitude and judgment have very different energies. Judgment looks at life and asks what is missing. Gratitude notices what is here. Judgment compares this moment with another moment. Gratitude inhabits this one. You may begin with something simple. The warmth of a cup held between your hands. The sound of someone you love laughing. A tree outside your window. The fact that your heart has carried you through another day. Gratitude does not deny suffering. It simply refuses to allow suffering to become the entire landscape. There may still be grief. There may still be unanswered questions. There may still be people you cannot safely welcome back into your life. And yet, there can also be gratitude. This is one of the beautiful mysteries of the heart. It can hold more than one truth at once. You can grieve what happened and appreciate what it taught you. You can miss someone and know that letting them go was right. You can forgive and still maintain a boundary. You can love someone and choose not to walk beside them anymore. You can feel sadness and still be at peace. Peace does not always mean the absence of difficult emotion. Sometimes peace means no longer fighting yourself for having that emotion. Imagine the ocean. Its surface may be restless while the deeper water remains quiet. Waves rise and fall, yet the ocean does not lose its identity because a storm passes across it. Perhaps you are like that. Your emotions are waves. Your awareness is deeper. Anger can move through you. Grief can move through you. Fear can move through you. You do not need to condemn yourself for any of them. You can allow them to move while remembering the deeper presence beneath them. This is where surrender begins. Surrender is sometimes misunderstood as giving up, but spiritually, surrender may be closer to giving over. Giving over the impossible task of controlling everything. Giving over the need to understand every person's behavior. Giving over the demand that your past should have happened differently. Giving over the belief that you must know exactly what comes next. You loosen your grip, and when you loosen your grip, you discover that life was never asking you to carry everything. There may be a source, a deeper intelligence, a loving presence moving through life that becomes easier to sense when you stop filling every silence with your own conclusions. You do not have to define it perfectly. Perhaps you simply feel it when you become very still. Maybe you have felt it while watching the sun disappear behind the horizon. Perhaps in the silence after prayer. Perhaps while holding someone's hand when there were no words left to say. For a moment, the boundaries of the separate self become softer. You remember that life is larger than the story in your head. And in that remembrance, judgment can feel strangely small. The person you are angry with becomes another human being trying to find their way. The person in the mirror becomes someone worthy of tenderness. The future becomes less like a problem to solve and more like a mystery to enter. And the source becomes less like something distant that you must reach and more like something quietly present within and around you. Perhaps this is what returning to your true self feels like. Not becoming spiritually perfect. Not never feeling anger again. Not approving of everything. Simply becoming less willing to abandon your own inner peace every time life fails to match your expectations. You still notice what is unhealthy. You still make choices. You still speak your truth. But you begin doing these things from a different place. Less fear, less condemnation, more clarity, more compassion, more trust. And when you forget, as every human being does, you return again. You return through one conscious breath, one moment of silence, one act of forgiveness, one thought of gratitude, one willingness to see differently. Gradually, you may discover that the freedom you were seeking was never hidden in another person's apology, in winning an argument, or in finally being understood by everyone around you. It was waiting in your willingness to stop carrying what no longer belonged in your heart. And now another invitation appears. How do you live this understanding when ordinary life begins again? When someone irritates you tomorrow, when an old memory returns, when fear awakens in the middle of the night, or when you catch yourself standing in judgment once more? Perhaps the answer is not found in becoming perfect at non-judgment. Perhaps it is found in learning a few gentle ways to return again and again to the peace that has been within you all along. And so the question is no longer whether you will ever judge again. You probably will. You are human. Old habits of thought may return when you are tired, frightened, disappointed, or uncertain. Someone may say something that touches an old wound, and before you realize it, the mind may begin building its case again. This does not mean you have lost your way. It simply means another opportunity to return has appeared. Perhaps living without the need to judge is not a destination you finally reach. Perhaps it is a gentle practice of remembering. You remember that you can pause. You remember that a thought is not a command. You remember that another person's behavior does not have to determine the quality of your inner world. And you remember that beneath the noise of reaction, there is still a quiet place within you that has not been disturbed. You might begin each day by spending a few moments with that quiet place. Before the world begins asking things of you, before messages arrive, before responsibilities gather around your attention, simply sit in stillness. Notice your breathing. Feel your body. Listen. You do not have to make anything happen. You are simply allowing yourself to remember what silence feels like before the mind begins naming everything. Perhaps you can quietly set an intention for the day. May I see without condemning. May I understand before I react. May I remain connected to peace, even when life does not behave according to my expectations. Then you carry that intention gently, not as another standard by which to judge yourself, but as a direction in which you wish to walk. During the day, you may notice judgment appearing. Perhaps someone drives too slowly in front of you. Someone interrupts you. A family member repeats the same behavior that has frustrated you for years. You see someone online living differently from you, and the mind immediately creates an opinion. In that moment, you can simply notice. There is no need to fight the thought. You might take one breath and ask, can I see this differently? Sometimes the answer may come immediately, sometimes it may not. But the question itself creates space, and in that space, the ego no longer has complete control of the moment. You may also discover the quiet power of gratitude. At the end of the day, rather than reviewing everything that went wrong, you can notice what was given. A conversation, a meal, a moment of laughter, a lesson hidden inside a difficult encounter, the chance to begin again tomorrow. Gratitude does not ask you to pretend that everything is wonderful. It simply trains your attention to notice that even in an imperfect life, there is something sacred quietly happening. And when resentment returns, as it sometimes will, perhaps forgiveness can become a daily practice rather than a single dramatic decision. You might bring someone to mind and quietly say, "I release you from the role I have given you in my suffering." You are not saying that what happened was right. You are not inviting them back. You are simply removing them from the position of controlling your present peace. And perhaps you can offer the same words to yourself. I release myself from the demand that I should have known everything before I learned it. There is so much gentleness in this. You begin understanding that spiritual growth is not the process of becoming someone who never makes mistakes. It is becoming increasingly aware of when you have left your center and increasingly willing to return. Again and again, you return. From fear to love, from resentment to forgiveness, from comparison to gratitude, from control to trust, from judgment to understanding. You may find that relationships begin changing, even when the other people do not. Perhaps someone who once had the power to disturb you no longer does. They may behave exactly as before, but something inside you has changed. You see the pattern without entering it. You recognize their anger without making it your anger. You hear their judgment without needing to return judgment. You understand that their behavior belongs to their consciousness, while your response belongs to yours. This is inner freedom. It is quiet. It may not look impressive from the outside. No one may applaud the moment you choose not to continue an argument. No one may know that you finally released resentment you carried for 20 years. No one may see the evening when you sat alone and forgave yourself for something that had filled you with shame. But your heart knows, and perhaps the source within you knows, the peace you begin experiencing is its own confirmation. Imagine again that river we spoke about earlier. It continues flowing around rocks, fallen branches, unexpected turns. It does not stop at every obstacle and demand that the landscape change. It responds, it adjusts, it continues. Perhaps you can live a little more like that. There will be obstacles. There will be people you do not understand. There will be losses you did not choose and changes you cannot prevent. But you can continue flowing without turning every difficulty into an enemy. You can trust that life does not need to be perfect for you to be present within it. And perhaps one day you will look back and realize that the people you once judged most harshly became unexpected teachers. Some taught you boundaries. Some taught you patience. Some showed you wounds you had not healed. Some taught you when to stay. Some taught you when to leave. Some taught you that you could survive being misunderstood. And some simply taught you that your peace was too precious to keep handing away. Even the person you once were becomes a teacher. You may look back with tenderness instead of embarrassment and realize that every version of you was searching for the same thing: love, belonging, peace, a sense of connection. You were not becoming worthy through all those years. You were slowly remembering that worthiness was never missing. You were not creating a true self from nothing. You were removing what had hidden it. The fear, the comparison, the resentment, the need to prove, the need to control, the need to judge. And beneath all of it, something simple remained: awareness, presence, love. Perhaps this is what connection with the source has always been. Not traveling somewhere far away, but becoming quiet enough to recognize what has never left you. So when you leave this moment and return to your ordinary life, you do not need to remember every word. Remember only this: you can see clearly without condemning. You can protect yourself without hating. You can disagree without abandoning love. You can forgive without returning to what hurt you. And you can let another person walk their path without making their path responsible for your peace. The next time judgment rises within you, perhaps you can place your hand over your heart and pause. Notice the breath moving in and out. Remember the sky behind the clouds. Remember the ocean beneath the waves. Remember that thoughts come and go, but the awareness noticing them remains. Then quietly ask yourself, what would love see here that fear cannot see? You do not have to force an answer. Just remain open. Sometimes love will invite compassion. Sometimes love will invite forgiveness. Sometimes love will tell you to leave. Sometimes love will ask you to speak. Sometimes love will simply ask you to stop carrying something that ended long ago. Trust that you can learn the difference. And trust yourself enough to listen. There is nothing you need to become in this moment. There is only something you may be ready to remember. The peace you have searched for in other people's approval has been within you. The freedom you believe required someone else's apology has been within you. The love you thought you had to earn has been within you. And perhaps giving up the need to judge is simply one more doorway back to that remembrance. May you walk through it gently. May you release what has become too heavy. May you forgive yourself for the years you did not know how. May you allow others to be responsible for their own journey while you become responsible for the consciousness you bring to yours. And when you forget, may you remember again. There is no hurry. The river continues. The seasons turn. The sky remains behind every storm. And beneath every fearful thought, every old resentment, and every judgment you have carried, the quiet presence of your true self is still waiting, not asking you to become someone new, but inviting you home. If something in this reflection spoke to you, you may wish to share in the comments what judgment, resentment, or expectation you feel ready to release. Sometimes giving words to what we are letting go of can become the beginning of a new relationship with ourselves. And if these quiet spiritual journeys help you reconnect with the peace and wisdom already within you, you are welcome to subscribe and continue walking with us. Until we meet again, be gentle with yourself. Be gentle with those whose journeys you cannot fully understand. Trust what is unfolding. Choose love whenever you remember. And let peace begin where it has always been waiting, within you.